A former CIA intelligence officer is sharing his struggles with the mysterious illness that first affected federal employees stationed in Cuba in 2016.
One of the most controversial health mysteries in recent years.
A seasoned CIA officer, Mark Polymeropoulos, ran clandestine operations across Europe and Asia. So when he traveled to Moscow in 2017, the watching eyes of Russian intelligence did not faze him.
The amount of ringing in my ears was just astounding. And things were getting worse and worse and worse. And I started to hear the noise, and I'm really in disbelief.
In December 2016, a CIA officer checked into the American Embassy's health office in Havana when he started suffering from nausea, headache, and dizziness. Days later, 2 more CIA officers reported similar ailments. By late 2018, the number grew to 26 Americans and 13 Canadians experiencing nausea, hearing loss, vertigo, nosebleeds, and focusing issues. In all the cases, victims claimed that the symptoms were triggered by a strange noise they'd heard at their homes or hotel rooms. One person said the noise was high-pitched. Another described a beam of sound pointed into their rooms. Some insisted that the noise more closely resembled marbles rolling along the floor. The illnesses confounded medical experts. Doctors at the University of Pennsylvania who examined some of the victims diagnosed concussion-like symptoms, but found no signs they'd suffered concussions. I know what you must be thinking. The Cuban government is up to something, right? The Cubans firmly deny they're responsible, and many American investigators believe them. That's because they still don't know who or what made the victims sick. Was it a new type of weapon? The CIA claims it doesn't know of any weaponry that could cause these symptoms. But then again, would the CIA really spill the beans if they knew more about this? What about ultrasound? One theory holds that a pair of covert eavesdropping devices placed too close to each other by Cuban agents may have inadvertently produced such a reaction, like the kind of feedback you hear when someone stands too close to a microphone. But the FBI has found no evidence to substantiate that argument. In fact, ultrasound is above the range of human hearing. Recordings that were made of the sounds from some of the victims only added to the confusion. 2 scientists who studied the recordings believe they captured the sound of lovelorn male crickets. Alexander Stubbs of the University of California says the insects are incredibly loud. You can hear them from inside a diesel truck going 40 miles an hour on the highway. Still, the scientists had no idea why the sounds might lead to illness in humans. Maybe it was just nerves.
I woke up in the middle of the night because I had this incredible case of vertigo. It felt almost as if I was in some kind of, carnival ride. And I'll tell you, Catherine, I'd spent years in war zones of Iraq and Afghanistan. I'd put my life on the line. This was the most terrifying experience of my life. I had no control.
Cuba is a high-threat, high-stress post, a former embassy official told ProPublica. Diplomats are warned that there will be surveillance. There will be listening devices in your house, probably in your car. For some people, that puts them in a high-stress mentality, in a threat anticipation mode. True, but then how to explain what happened in China? In May 2018, an American posted in the consulate in Guangzhou was diagnosed with the very same mystery illness. Ultimately, 15 Americans were evacuated because of that. While the seemingly airborne cause of these brain injuries is still a mystery, the fallout is clear. The Americans removed 60% of their diplomats from Cuba and expelled 15 Cuban diplomats from Washington, D.C. The mysterious sounds may well be the opening shots, in a new kind of Cold War. What do you think about all of this? George and Jenny Sodder of West Virginia were forced to cope not only with the immeasurable loss of their children, but also with the mysterious circumstances surrounding that loss. After the Sodder home burned to the ground on the night before Christmas in 1945, 5 of the 10 Sodder children were still alive and accounted for. But what about the other 5? From all accounts, it would seem that they had vanished into thin air. In the months leading up to the fire, a few strange encounters took place. First, an unknown man approached George Sodder at his home looking for work. After George told him he didn't need any workers, the man looked up at the fuse box outside and said, "This is going to cause a fire someday." The remark seemed odd since George recently had the power supply company check the electrical wires, and all checked out fine. Another notable visit took place at the Sodder house just weeks before the fire. A local salesman tried to sell life insurance to them. Upon George's refusal, the exasperated salesman threatened, "Your goddamn house is going up in smoke, and your children are going to be destroyed. You are going to be paid for the dirty remarks you have been making about Mussolini." Just before Christmas, the older Sodder boys saw a suspicious car parked along Highway 21 for a few days in a row. A man inside the car was watching the Sodder children closely as they returned from school. But this was not going to be the only strange things to occur leading up to the disaster. Fast forward a couple of days. The night before Christmas was frigidly cold. Jenny and George Sodder were ready to turn in for the evening with 3-year-old Sylvia at about 10:30 p.m. The oldest girl, Marion Sodder, had brought home some toys from the dime store where she worked and gave them to the younger Sodder kids. Jenny allowed them to stay up later than usual to play with their new gifts. But she reminded the boys, Maurice and Louis, that before they go to bed, they needed to shut the chicken coop and feed the cows. Around midnight, a phone call forced Jenny awake. When she answered, a woman asked for an unknown name. Jenny would later recall that the woman had a weird laugh, and others were also laughing and clinking glasses in the background. Jenny told the woman she had the wrong number and didn't think much about it. At that time, the house was all quiet. Marion was asleep on the couch, and Jenny noticed that the doors were unlocked, and the curtains were still open. Typically, the children take care to secure the house before they turn in for bed, but for some reason, not on this fateful night. Jenny locked up and closed the shades, assuming that the rest of the children had gone to sleep in the attic. She then retreated to bed. Jenny woke when, as she later described, something hit the roof, like a rubber ball. It rolled and hit the ground with a thump. However, she didn't pay much attention to it and went back to sleep. Another half hour passed, and this time she awoke to the smell of smoke. The staircase to the attic had begun to fill up with fire. Oddly, when the Sodders yelled up to the attic, they heard no response from the 5 younger children.
I ran to the bottom of the stairs where the children were supposed to be sleeping. I yelled and yelled, and 2 boys, John and George Jr., came stumbling down. Their hair was singed by the flames.
Notice how I didn't say vanished into smoke before? That's because in the ruins of the fire, 0 physical evidence of the children could be found, which is virtually impossible from a scientific standpoint. But that wasn't all that smelled off about the events of that night. Apparently, George tried to save the children who he believed were still trapped inside by using his coal truck, which strangely was inoperable. The phone lines to the house were found to have been cut. A woman claimed to have seen all 5 missing children peering from a passing car while the fire was in progress. And a woman at a Charleston hotel who saw the children's photos in a newspaper said she had seen 4 of the 5 children a week after the fire. The children were accompanied by 2 women and 2 men, all of Italian origin, she said in a statement. I tried to talk to the children in a friendly manner, but the men appeared hostile and wouldn't allow it. The Sodder family theorized that the children had been kidnapped, perhaps in an attempt to extort money, perhaps to coerce George into joining the local Italian mafia, being that the family was of Italian descent, or perhaps in retaliation for George's outspoken criticism of Mussolini and Italy's fascist government. From the 1950s until Jenny Sodder's death in the late 1980s, the Sodder family maintained a billboard on State Route 16 with pictures of the 5 vanished children and offering a reward for information. The last known surviving Sodder child, Sylvia, at the age of 69, still doesn't believe her siblings perished in the fire.